Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the 40k Fireside podcast. I'm David Gaylord, and I'm joined by my good friend Vik and I. Together, we discuss 40k and the meta from our perspective, along with events we've recently been to and those that have got coming up. So come on down to the Fireside and listen.
Okay, everyone, welcome back to Fireside episode 12.5. Is that what we're calling this?
Yeah, 12.513, the mini-part series maybe, something like that.
Awesome, yeah. So we're going to be doing like a kind of a run through our thoughts on Arks of Omen. We finished the Las Vegas Open, and that's what we talked about in our last episode. If you want to see some serious ranting and our thoughts on that, it was a little bit negative, so I do apologize, but maybe you guys can find that interesting. We're going to be a bit more positive on this one. We're going to try and look forward and see how we're going to move into Arks of Omen, into this new meta. What are the armies and the army archetypes we think might be successful? And kind of go from there. And I think maybe the best way to do that, Dave, is talking about kind of what we are testing at the moment, what we're playing around with, and kind of what we found so far.
Sure.
I think you might have done a little bit more testing than me. Would you say that's fair?
Yeah, a little bit, yeah. Not too much, though. So we're kind of going in it from a high-level perspective, guys. We've obviously had a few weeks to digest the Arks of Omen, but primarily most of our testing has been for the Las Vegas Open. There was obviously that period where we weren't sure what we were playing at Las Vegas Open, which we completely neglected to mention, but Frontline Gaming, I think, made the right decision there, so we've been primarily focused on Nephilim, but we do have some things in mind. There have been some results, and we've been looking at stuff, and we've kind of gotten a grip on what we think is going to be good. So I think what are some of the biggest impact changes from Arks of Omen, do you think? I think Detachments is obviously one of those, right?
Yeah, I'd say the detachments, the Arks of Omen detachment, is a massive change into the way that armies are designed, and it has very subtle impacts on things. Mm-hmm. The reliance on needing troops to open up slots without taking up too much CP is gone, but at the same time, you may have a lot of a certain kind of slot, but you'll be a bit more limited in other ones compared to taking a double patrol. Mm-hmm. So if you take a double patrol, you can have 4 of elites, fast attacks, or heavy supports. Mm-hmm. Now, in an Arks of Omen detachment, you can pick either heavy support, fast attack, or elites to have 6 of, and the other ones you'll only have 3 of. Mm-hmm. One of the armies that I was looking into was Eldar, Craftworld Eldar, and initially, on first glance, I was like, great, I don't have to take 2 random units of troops or 1 random unit of troops to build this army, and I'm still going to be on 6 command points. But you ideally want 4 elite choices and 6+ fast attack choices. Because if you take 3 units of Dire Avengers, you can't take any Howling Banshees or Striking Scorpions unless you go for the elite slots. And if you go for the elite slots, you only have 3 fast attack slots. So you can't take like 3 Vipers, because where are you going to get your Wind Riders in?
Yeah, so that's a fair point. I would have actually said that. I would have assumed basically it makes no difference, but you raise a good use case right there.
Yeah, you don't realize it until you actually start putting the list down and building them. That it's not necessarily all positive. There is some drawbacks to list building for certain factions. Saying that
demons are definitely that, because correct me if I'm wrong, but you can't allied in a faction of the same faction. So there's the Arks of Omen detachment, and then there's the other detachment that you use to soup stuff in. They can't share the same faction. So actually, for demons, it's extremely limiting. I'm kind of disappointed in GW in this one, because demons is obviously quite a new book. So you basically either have to play Mono Zinch or Mono Khorne if you want to use that Warpstorm table, and you need to fill that in 1 detachment. So like a Mono Zinch army, for example, on 2,000 points is basically unplayable. So what that realistically means is that to get some resemblance of a well-rounded army, you need to play only the Undivided. So you only get access to the Undivided Warpstorm, which is, I think they could have maybe done that a little bit better, I think.
Yeah, not designed so great on that one. And I think the more we practice this, the more we notice the little nuances. I'd say another big change for this, outside just the detachment, is the loss of Armor of Contempt, which is one of the data slate changes. Armor of Contempt reduces AP by 1 on all attacks, and shooting and combat. And it was kind of widespread across the game. I'd say about 30 to 40% of armies had access to Armor of Contempt. That no longer exists now. So there are armies which built a lot of durability into, say, if you're against AP2, you can stand in cover, and then you get Armor of Contempt that counts as AP 0.
Just like the army we played, Thousand Suns. Great with Armor of Contempt.
Exactly. For Thousand Suns, on top of that, All is Dust can give you another one against damage 1. So you can be fighting against AP 2, damage 1, and you would still get a 2-up save if you were in cover. Yep. Now, with that gone, there's actually a massive difference, particularly for AP1 weaponry, which doesn't ignore cover. So AP1 weaponry, fighting before, would give a 2-up save to a base 3-up save Armor of Contempt unit in cover. Now, it would just be a 3-up save. And a 3-up save compared to a 2-up save, you may not think that's very much, but that's one of the biggest jumps you can have statistically.
Twice the damage. Yep,
Twice the damage, so you double up the damage. So that is a very significant breakpoint, which significantly weakens the durability of power armor armies.
But speaking of power armor armies, obviously, everyone knows at this point, Marines got almost free war gear upgrades. Some of the best units coming out of that probably being, I think, Sterngarder 1, Deathwatch Veterans another. I think Terminators obviously being up there, right, with free Thunderhammer Storm Shields, Cyclone Missile Launchers going to 10 points, and a bunch of other kind of obscure units that you never would have bought. Bought being a keyword I'll put there. Getting like random 15 points upgrades for free. So I think Raven Wing, Black Knight Bikers, all of a sudden get all their plasmas for free, and suddenly you're attaching a 20-point upgrade or 15-point upgrade on a 20-point unit, effectively making it play at double points, which is a huge change for the game, of course.
For sure. And the points cost do cut both ways, because there is one particular army who's been a demon in the meta, a proper kind of alien to the meta, which Dave loves, but that's the Tyranids have taken huge points nerfs. Yeah. And I think as much as Space Marines have gained points in their armies, Tyranids have lost points in their armies.
I think Tyranids are probably the worst army in the game now. No, I'm not even joking. I genuinely think that they're probably the worst army in the game. Just for clarification, guys, if you don't play them, you won't probably play against them ever again. But their core units, as in not core the keyword, but the core units of how the army needed to actually fundamentally operate, went up between 30 and 50%. So I think an old list is probably playing at 2,400 points now, 2,500 points perhaps, depending on your build variant. But in addition to that, they have awful secondaries, and secondaries are so much more important now. A lot of armies got better secondaries, so the day is nigh for Tyranids, never to be seen again. So if you want to buy some Scythe Hierodulls, some Warriors, hit me up on Discord.
I mean, the data sheets are still very strong, but you can't actually build a coherent army with the amount of points that they cost now.
I'm gonna a fully upgraded Warrior. Actually, just Bone Swords and Death Spitters off the top of my head is 40 points.
Nice.
That's terrible. That's really bad. It might even be 45, to be honest with you.
Ouch.
A Ravener, I think, is 45 points now as well. And just be aware that these models have a 4-up base save. And a Terminator, 35 points, and you get free Thunderhammer Storm Shield, and 10 points Cyclone. So, the whole game is completely flipped on its head from where we were previously.
I think that's 4 big changes in Arks of Omen. I think the 5th one, the one that I really love, is the data slate introduced and nerfed flyers, forcing you to place flyers into strategic reserves.
Okay.
Now, flyers have been a defining part of competitive 40k for as long as I can remember. We start off with 5 Eldar flyers, all the way going to the recent AdMech flyers, and the even more recent Sunshark bombers and Harpies. All of these units have been able to get line of sight to hidden units and essentially tilt the game away from players if they aren't able to deal with them, or on an alpha strike introduce huge amounts of damage. So flyers are a very powerful part of the competitive scene, and now they have to be placed in strategic reserve, so they can't be used on turn 1. When they come in on turn 2, bombing units are unable to bomb. They just have to land somewhere on the board.
And you have to remain on the board if you're bombing as well.
Yeah, really tasty. So
I'm going to do a little bit of a hot take here.
Oh, yeah?
I don't think flyers are dead. That's just me. I think you could probably still play the Sunshark Bomber.
I think you can play the Sunshark Bomber.
Yep. It's interesting.
At 165 points for the Sunshark Bomber, it's actually an extremely efficient shooting profile. Now, I would say there's one negative attached to it, that in Fireside, Enclaves being within 9 inches, giving you the +1 to hit, is no longer a thing because you enter the board outside 9 inches.
Yeah.
You may have to wait patiently for an extra turn. So potentially it's 50-50. I think, I've been building some lists with Tau. And I did try putting the Sunshark Bombers in there, and I just progressively kept taking them out for other things.
Yep.
I would say that if we talk about the previous point of Armor of Contempt not existing, some of the Tau troop choices like breaches, -1 AP accelerated burst cannons on their vehicles, all of these things have really become a lot stronger.
Yeah.
They've also taken points decreases, stuff like the breaches and the Fire Warriors. So I think, Tau are going to find a different way of putting their output in rather than.
I think Tau's still got plenty of play. I think the secondaries didn't get hit that much either. Speaking of secondaries, some good changes there. Psychic Interrogation, probably being the most prominent one here, is reverted back again to direct line of sight. So I think even during the short time I've played, they've changed it from non-line of sight to line of sight to now non-line of sight to line of sight again. So. It doesn't strike me as a very difficult one to balance. I don't actually think that it was too powerful anyway. But that's a huge nerf for Tyranids. Massive nerf. And then we've also got behind enemy lines, which got significantly better. Behind enemy lines, way better. And it's not because you can gain the CP, guys. It's because if you have one unit, you get 3 points. So for me, behind enemy lines is the new Stranglehold. I definitely think that that's a really positive way to build your list around. And who builds lists better for behind enemy lines than the one that supposedly took the big nerf? And I'm going to cut any spoilers here, guys. Harlequins going from a 4-up invulnerable to a 5-up invulnerable, they are still amazing. They're still perhaps the best army in the game for 2 reasons. Behind enemy lines got a lot better, and secondaries for other people got worse. Their detachments got better. The list building functionality got better. So they got some points increases there, but the things they got points increases on are actually very good. So the aura for -6 inch range is very powerful. And then I guess that's 3 already. Fourth one being that Armor of Contempt being gone means that actually the Shuriken Cannon on the Starweaver is very, very strong all of a sudden. Particularly in kind of 2 ways. Obviously, going from effective AP1 to effective AP2 is huge, but more so because Marine's going to be very, very prevalent, and actually just having 6 shots on a transport that is strength 6, -2, effective, flat 2, and of course the AP goes up when you roll 6s, is very efficient shooting platform for killing Marines as well.
For sure. I would say though that I think I've been playing around with the Harlequin list as well. Initially I was building them all into light, because I thought that makes a lot of sense here, the shooting platforms are excellent, but I think it's not just the shooting, it's the melee side of things which improved as well for Harlequins. They're not able to take a hit, but they're certainly able to deal a hit in combat. So running Twilight or even Dark, I think Twilight's probably better. Just the melee troops is actually very, very effective.
Interesting.
Because you've gone to a 5-up invul, you do have to kind of clean kill things and be very careful what you tag up with stuff. But yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see how the Harlequins work. I'm a little bit more negative on them than Dave and a lot of the other top players. I do think that the reduction in durability will make an impact against good players where the level of attrition may be too great. I know there are many games I've played against Harlequins where they've kind of just about hung on to win on points, when realistically with a 5-up invul they would have just got blown off the board. So we'll see how it goes. It'll be very interesting.
That'll be an interesting one to watch out for. Custodes also got quite a significant buff. As per my understanding, they basically went back to their first iteration where you could turn off rerolls and then transhuman on your units as many times as you want. And then there's that strat where you can put a unit into like a Katara doctrine as well, which is really powerful. So for me in my head, they're sort of back to where they were, I want to say at LVO last year, but they're around that post-LVO kind of status. That was kind of a terror house for a good month and a half, 2 months, where apparently 50% of people were actually playing Custodes. I had a tournament where I played 5 Custodes players in a row.
They do gain obsec on their infantry models again.
That's right.
Not the characters though, but that still brings them gives them a lot more strength. And the only super major that we've had since the new rules has been Adelaide, I think, one in Australia.
Uprising.
Uprising. That one was won by Custodes running 20 Wardens.
Liam Hackett, I believe. Or was it?
who wins everything. So
yeah, champion. I don't want to get confused between Liam and Eric. It may have been one or the other.
no, it was Liam.
It was Liam, right? Yeah. Running 20 Wardens, definitely a unique build there. And then we've got obviously Marines. So I think Marines are, it's very interesting. From Vik and I's perspective, Marines are very interesting, not only because of the changes, but because of how much access everyone has to them. Mm-hmm. And I think if you're a top player, if you're a meta player, or you're chasing and want to do well in tournaments, understanding the stock reserves of what armies people just have in their rooms lying around is a good thing to get used to. And Marines, obviously, they're the most dominant super faction in terms of what people own. So I think naturally a lot of people are going to gravitate towards playing them. And on that, Iron Hands clearly got a lot better because they can stay in Devastator Doctrine the whole game, which I think is not a great change for the game. But it's only a bad change because Codex Warfare, for some reason, they decided to not cap at 5 points per Doctrine. So it's basically an auto 15 for Iron Hands, because as soon as you kill a unit in the Devastator Doctrine, which you're permanently in, you have only heavy weapons, you get 2 points every time you kill a unit. So that is immediately making Iron Hands really strong. Obviously, they also reroll ones and ignore hit penalty modifiers. And in addition to that, the heavy weapons are usually the ones that got the biggest discounts. Like, I don't know, some Devastator with a multi-melter, or just a random bike, or even a scout with, I think, a multi-melter, suddenly gets them for free. So that, I think, is probably, apart from Thunderhammers and Storm Shields, that's probably where the most amount of free war gear was obtained as well.
Yeah, for sure. And I think we've got to watch out for Marines. There are a number of sub-factions which are really good. I've heard people talk about Dark Angels as being very, very strong. I've heard people talk about Iron Hands. Obviously, that's the most obvious one if you just look at it.
I've been playing some Death Watch, and actually that's what I was thinking about bringing to Las Vegas if they had brought in the changes. The kill teams are really awesome. Unfortunately, they lost probably their best secondary, but the kill teams are really cheap these days. 5-up Feel No Pain on them. They absolutely slap in melee as well. They have good threat range. I think if you want to pick up a Space Marine faction that will be competitive, but also reward you as a player skill and enable you to grow as a player and have a lot of fun, Death Watcher is certainly up there. I think Iron Hands and Ravenwing probably a little bit point and clicky for my taste.
And I've heard some people talk about Salamanders as well, who have the best lore because they're awesome. So there's that, and obviously my favorite Space Marine faction is Grey Knights, and Grey Knights got a few really tasty points decreases here and there. They took a nerf on Purifying Ritual, so it's Warp Charge 6, but I think a lot of people were already dropping off using Purifying Ritual because it takes up too many casts in their army.
Yeah. And you lose a lot of output having to do Purifying Ritual.
For sure. Right? And it's even swingy at Warp Charge 5, to be honest. Warp Charge 6 means that the decision's easier. Just don't take Purifying Ritual. Yeah. You can build better secondaries now because they play behind enemy lines really well. They play Teleport Assault, which got buffed
hugely.
5 points if you kill anything. If you either Gate of Infinity, Teleport to Shunt, or Deep Strike.
And the best part about Grey Knights is you can just, if you're a smart player, you can sequence it. So your unit that teleported is just killing a unit that's got like 2 wounds left in it, right? Boom,
Correct.
5 points.
Yeah, easy peasy. So that, and then your third secondary can be anything you want, usually an action, and they can play R&D very well. So
yeah, Grey Knights looking good.
Grey Knights looking okay.
And we've got the are they a boogeyman just yet?
Is it the Imperial Guard?
Do you think they're a boogeyman? I don't think that's fair, right?
I think they are.
Actually won anything yet?
I think they are.
They're a boogeyman already. Okay,
I think they're very good.
I'm going to say that they're not, but guys, Imperial Guard is what I'm looking at. I'm playing it in a couple of team events. I'm playing a game probably tonight, or on the weekend at least, and they seem really good. Obviously, they're a new book, and they haven't really had many tournaments behind them, but they have access to a lot of well-rounded elements. Lehman Russ is just a really efficient datasheet, and their secondaries are very, very good. The secondaries are basically, you have 2 infantry units on 2 table quarters, and you get 10 points. And if you've got mortars that can sit back and shoot anything indirectly, that's just 10 points. And then obviously you can move your infantry units into other table quarters. It's basically like a significantly better engage on all fronts, just for infantry. And then they've got Inflexible Command, which more or less just rewards you for playing your army how you should play your army, which I don't think is ever a good secondary to have in the game. Codex Warfare is very similar to that, I think, in a lot of ways. I think tons of armies are going to be relying on Codex Warfare to win games. But Inflexible Command is more or less keep all your stuff within range of officers, and then if you kill something under an order, get 2 points. So, like, you can get 5 points a turn with this. Someone's going to correct me because I'm going to have that wrong somewhere, but, it's 1 point for having every infantry unit within range of a Voxcaster, which is 24 inches. 2 points for having your tanks in range of your tank commander, which is 12 inches, and then if you get 2 points for killing a unit under an order. So maybe it caps at 3, but regardless, very doable. Should be a 15 most games. And then they can do stuff like Rod or R&D or something like that. Banners, obviously, very reliably as well. So I think Guard definitely looking very strong. Leontis, the new model, looks really cool. I think they've done a great job of him. He's actually really good because, well, his data sheet is just great anyway, and he actually has the counterpunch in the army as well, so he brings a lot to the table. I think you're going to be seeing quite a few Leontises, quite a few Lehman Russes. That's definitely something you're going to want to think about.
Awesome, man. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if there's any other fact. I mean, I was thinking about Sisters a little bit, and I don't think much has really changed on the Sisters front. They're a little bit more fragile, but less flyers is always a good thing.
Less flyers is always a good thing. I'm just going to bring up the Warhammer 40k factions. And one that comes to mind straight away, Chaos Knights and Imperial Knights. What do you think about them?
Oh, true. Gosh, yes. I think they've become a lot better. They have a high volume of AP 1-2 shooting. So actually, they're going to be able to kill any faction that's put up against them. There are a lot of matchups that I noticed when I was, for example, playing Emperor's Children, where Knights just couldn't deal with power armor units sitting in cover. Now, they definitely can, and I think both factions are good, both in terms of killing and playing the mission, particularly primary control, and the Imperial Knights have excellent secondary scoring as well. I think the combination of those things are going to make them very good. I think we're going to see that the armies that have the most success are armies that are high-scoring armies. We're a bit, I don't know if it's for better or worse, I think it's probably for worse. The armies which are really strong on output, so that is Iron Hands and Imperial Guard like that, are also incredible primary control and also secondary scoring. So I think it might be very obvious for people what direction they need to go in if they want consistent tournament results.
I would agree, but I also think this is a period of time when a lot of innovation is definitely available. I think Chaos Knights are quite strong. I think Imperial Knights are quite strong. Chaos Demons probably got a little bit stronger, in my opinion, because the Skull Cannon went down 10 points.
Oh, nice.
Oh, baby, that's actually a steal at 90 points, guys.
Yeah,
Skull Cannons are good. But, I think with the shooting elements, the big boys become a little bit tougher to use. I'm just scrolling down the thing here. Craft Worlds, like we talked about before. A really interesting one, I think, is Drakari, which got a significant upgrade. Not only because the Armor of Contempt gone, but because the meta has completely changed. They definitely hit way harder than what they did before. If they were like a 45% win faction now, I think they're going to be around like 53-ish. So a big upgrade for those guys. Leagues of Votann probably got...
Leagues of Votann.
Yeah, they
took bad points changes, man.
Oh, they got points changes as well.
Yeah. Really brutal.
I'm sorry, guys. I'm sorry. And some viewer might dislike me for this, but I was kind of unimpressed when I actually saw them on the table as well. For me, the models are far too small for my liking, but yeah, it's interesting. Necrons, what do you think? Better or worse? Probably just middle of the pack, right?
They got a slight nerf to their secondaries. They got a slight nerf to their, because they can't take the pre-game move and the obsec.
Of course, yeah.
That might be enough just to bring them into being a balanced faction. Yeah. It's a bit of a shame. I think there are a few factions, and one of them is Necrons, that just need a new codex just to make them interesting.
Yeah, precisely.
A little bit boring.
And I think armies like Necrons will really struggle into armies like Ravenwing, Imperial Guard, and and Iron Hands, right? Armies that will just output you right from the get-go. That's Necrons really don't want to play against them. Orcs definitely got a little bit better. They lost one of their secondaries, but if you're an Orc player, I think stick with it. Tau, probably we're gonna have to wait and see that one.
I've got some ideas on Tau, I think. So I'm very excited to actually do a little bit of testing, and I'll feed back to you guys on that one.
I think if anything, that's definitely a terrain-dependent one for sure.
Yeah. I mean, we're lucky because we'll always play on like at least moderately good terrain.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it'll be all right.
Thousand Suns got significantly nerfed, I would say. Losing Hour of Contempt is really big. They lost Wrath of Magnus as well, which is a terrible secondary in general, like game design wise. it's either an auto 15 or it's like a 10, or it's like literally unplayable. And it requires just weird interactions with your opponent to keep tallies and all that stuff. It's a lot of admin. So I'm kind of, from a game design perspective, I'm glad that one went away. I'm just glad I got to use it a couple of times. And then I think that brings it over. Oh, but your favorite one, of course, Emperor's Children, Chaos Space Marines.
Hey, Emperor's Children got a massive buff to their individual secondary.
Okay.
And
They
also
did,
and the Arks of Omen detachment is actually excellent for them. Having access to 4 HQ choices off a single detachment is incredible. There's an FAQ in now that you can take Abaddon in one of these detachments, and you can just take loads of Blastmasters. Now, I would say losing Armor of Contempt makes the Terminator brick a little bit less durable, and I think it's to the point where that you maybe don't want to run them necessarily. But Emperor's Children have the massive benefit of getting the Slanesh keyword on their Possessed, which no other faction gets. So you can cast the 5-up Feel No Pain on some T6 -1 to wound Possessed.
Still pretty good.
Very cheap as well, so that's 280 points for the brick rather than the 400 plus for the Terminators.
Yep. I also know that there's been some online talk about Genestealer Cult. I think that they're definitely one of the armies to watch out for. I think they do suffer, like their secondaries are very good. No AOC is great for them. They got a discount as well. But I do think that that's an army that you can tick for and beat, primarily because their data sheets are susceptible to certain outputs. So it's an interesting one. I think if you were going to look at an army to play, Adeptus Mechanicus also got a little bit better, but I don't think their secondaries are really at it right now, unless you're playing on bowling ball terrain, which I think, they were probably very good on. One change we didn't talk about as well is the free Outflank, which is
game-changing.
Insanely good, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not very happy with this change. I think they could have done this in a more elegant way. But it does open up the effectiveness of a lot of units. Like, if you have a slow-moving shooting unit, let's take Eradicators, for example. They're a lot better if you can outflank them for free. Strategic reserves them for free.
I think a good way of thinking about this is imagine if every data sheet in the game suddenly had this unit can deep strike. That's kind of effectively what it is. So those slow-moving shooting platforms especially are very good. Iron Strider Ballistari or something like it, even a Disintegrator, something that can like come in from the side, have a good 30 to 40 inch shooting, or even Eradicators, which are still really good. Even if you don't deploy them on the board at that point, they make your opponent play that tax. So I think that's a huge one to think about. I know that we thought about something with Knights recently where you can bring them on a turn earlier, which is really cool. So you can bring them on turn 1 from strategic reserves, which is a really awesome tick as well. I agree. I don't think that it was a healthy change for the game. I would have loved to have seen them just make 0 to 9 power level just free, and then make 10 to 19 1 CP, and etc, etc. So you get a little bit for free, but being able to outflank 400 points of your army for free is kind of ridiculous.
A little bit nutty, for sure.
Yeah. And I think that's basically it, guys. I think from the takeaway from this is definitely a point where there's so much experimentation happening right now. I think if you're looking to play, and our next event is the International Team Tournament. Neither of us are playing Bournemouth because it's just a little bit too close to Vegas. I think if you're looking to play right now and you want to compete, this is one of the optimal times if you're willing to put in the effort. Just be careful around what you think the big things in the meta are going to be. How can you have data sheets? If you're playing an army, say for example, maybe the Knight variants, or you're playing Jakari, just make sure that you tick towards those top end armies. And I think at this point in the game too, people are going to be playing a lot of output. So if you've got an army that's got a good strong secondary game, that's a strong game plan in and of itself as well.
For sure, man, and that's really good advice there. And, I think people should enjoy this little period of time here where no one knows what they're doing. And we can all just have fun, maybe playing the factions that we really enjoy playing.
Yeah, it's good times. We're looking forward to it. We've got an event, the International Team Tournament this month. I'll be captain for Team Dice Down. We've got myself, Vik, George, Alex, and I'm forgetting someone.
Jim.
And Jim. We're probably looking at bringing we're looking at bringing the armies that we mentioned before. Obviously, we mentioned a lot of them, but an army like Chikari is suddenly a lot more viable. Knights are suddenly a lot more viable. Sisters, Grey Knights, Guard, Harlequins, everything's up in the air. And I think actually, choices. At this point, you either have got a massive list advantage because you've solved something, or you've gotten something really good that no one's seen, or everything's a little bit more balanced, and your you're suddenly competing a lot more on player skill. And I think, if anything, I think this update to the game will age quite well. I think that, apart from maybe the free Outflank, I think the game has actually become more balanced, and I think props to GW for being able to achieve that whilst impacting the game in a monumental manner, because when you make such massive changes to the game, there's just a chance, because of how many changes you make, that the game invariably becomes broken via some rules interaction or element.
For sure, yeah. So I'm excited to see how things go, and yeah, guys, make sure you interact with us in the comments. Tell us what factions that you think are going to be really good, and we'll reply to comments and have a discussion.
Yeah, and as always, really appreciate all the listeners. We've had a great time playing in Las Vegas. It's good to be back. It's good to be back in the UK, looking at UK events, and we're really excited. We'll try and maybe do some. Let us know, because I think we probably have a little bit of dead space between now and the ITT. Let us know in the comments what you think you would like us to cover. Maybe some topics. We'd be more than happy to get a faction expert on. Come and have a chat, especially if it's from the UK. And yeah, we'll sign off here. This has been David.
Cheers, guys. This is Vik. See you at the next Fireside.
13 or 13 and a half or 14 and a half.
We don't know anymore, do we? We need to do another mini one.
And then even it out. 12.51. See you guys.
See you.
Thank you for listening to the 40k Fireside podcast. Vik and I hope you've enjoyed listening, and we greatly appreciate any feedback that you can provide after the show.